GraphQL. Like many people have been telling, this is what we should do, but GraphQL put everything together and made it you do it. And there's no way that you don't do it. So once that sinks in, it's like, oh, I have all the tooling around, and that's the nicest part, I think. Yeah, I'm also working on for my project that I'm working on. I'm doing some GraphQL wrapping on top of JSON API service for simplifying, the transactions with the client. A lot of fun to be had there. In our case, we're doing Node.js, but there's no reason why you couldn't do it with PHP or Drupal. Anyways, I think that wow, this is a pretty decent crew. So today I'm gonna take the liberty to go first, and I'm gonna give a quick update on JSON API. So there are a bunch of things that are not 100% how we want to be in the dev version. You will not run into them. Like if you're using a dev right now, you probably won't run into them, but we want to fix those. One is we need to come up with a strategy to not run the assertions when asserts are disabled. And there was a change in policy in PHP, and since they are deprecating running asserts as a string that contains code, like an eval, they're deprecating that, but at the same time, now they run the contents of the assert always. And then, regardless of whether you have the asserts enabled or not in your php.ini or wherever you change that setting. So ideas on how to solve this would be will be welcomed. It's 292. I don't know. I couldn't read that issue number, but it's in the JSON API issue queue. I think that there is probably an easy solution. Maybe just an if check the INI version. Sorry, the INI setting, and then bail if not. Inside of the checking, I don't know. But there is that. Right now, it may be broken if you didn't install the module with Composer, because it's going to try to use a dev dependency to run the assertion. And if you didn't install that dev dependency, it may break. But it's okay. It's in dev. Did I not say that right, Wim?
I think mostly right. So there isn't actually a problem with the assertion running always on PHP 5, but it's true that we would be validating every response if schemata is installed and if the dev dependency JSON Rainbow / JSON schema is installed.
That's right. So we do the checking manually.
Right, yes. Yeah. So it would only break if you have all dev dependencies installed and schemata installed and running on PHP 5, which is pretty...
It's in that case, like I said, you will not run into this, but something that we want to fix. The other thing is that the major refactor that we did for the query builder missed something, and I think that Jingsheng, sorry if I didn't say that right, can say more. There is a bug in there, and we may want to reopen that and maybe place a failing test. Do you want to give a summary of what's going on there?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Sound unclear.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you very well.
So basically, we have a site, we have a group installed, and we try to expose the group content with JSON API. And it was working fine until we installed the group 8.x dash 1.2. Then we thought it was the refactoring issue, the commits in that issue broke the site. I mean, broke the functionality. But actually, my colleague found that the real problem was this issue. Was the title was JSON API extra overrides not implemented for the include properties. So we were able to backtrace to this issue.
That's fantastic news, actually.
And yeah, so that specific commit broke the integration with Groove. I mean, however, sorry, we haven't got the time to write a test yet.
Okay, yeah. If it's this is going to be a little bit hard because we don't want to add a group as a test dependency. So we need a way to figure out how to reproduce this in a test. But if it's not the refactor on the query builder, and if this is an already existing, because you said that this is into JSON API 1.2 already, right?
Correct.
Okay, cool. Then I misspoke. There is only one thing that we don't want to release just yet, and this is the assertion thing. And I'm confident that it's pretty easy, and it's a very weird edge case, as Wim was saying. So I think we're better than we thought. There is an existing issue with the group integration, but that may not be relevant on the case of the query builder refactor, which
issue is that group issue? Because I can't find it at least.
So we opened a new issue. Sorry, 1 second. So my colleague, he has actually wrote down an instruction for reproducing the problem.
Ah, super.
Yeah, I saw that this morning. It's very detailed. Thanks about that. Yeah, that helps.
Okay, I'll add it to the related issue to the one you just linked before, so that it's findable, it's connected. Thanks.
All right. Other than that, I did some cleaning, and I added some test coverage that Grim Reaper posted in an issue that was closed with the refactor, but we missed the tests. But we want the tests. If you want to get some tests in there, we're open to them. We love tests. That's it for JSON API, I think. Unless, Wim, I know that you've been doing stuff, so.
I am actively going. So as of last Friday, I'm basically going crazy on JSON API instead of on core REST. There is about 10 issues. 40% of the core RTBC queue currently is API first issues. 33% of which, so 33% of all RTBC issues are API first blockers that block important things for core REST, but also JSON API and GraphQL. So we are waiting there effectively in order for us to continue. And so because there's literally nothing I can do there except wait and work on other things, I am working hard on JSON API instead. So I started going through the entire issue queue, triaging, making connections between issues that are related, and started working on some issues and patches. And I will continue to do that for the rest of the week. So hopefully more good patches for you to review, Matteo, and hopefully some good progress.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I also saw that there are some issues that got committed recently.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe you or Ted want to talk about that, and what are the repercussions for REST and JSON API and GraphQL?
Yes. Maybe Ted wants, because this is basically mostly Ted's work. So and it's a big freaking deal. Oh, Ted, we can't hear you. No, sorry. I would translate what you were mouthing, but I'm not that good. Okay, sounds like Ted wants me to just talk in his place. Yeah, okay. So the issue that landed is one in deep typed data land, this one. So basically complex data is something in type data. And it's basically the thing that represents much of Drupal's entities and fields. And it's thanks to type data that Drupal is able to have a REST API, a JSON API, and a GraphQL implementation, all at the same time without us needing to reinvent lots of infrastructure. Now, there was one thing that was really missing, and that was the ability to indicate that a particular property, a field property, so given, for example, an entity reference field, there is a referenced ID that is a property, but there are other properties as well, such as the referenced entity type. So things like that. It's important that we're able to say which of those properties need to be exposed to the world or not. For example, for entity reference fields, there's also an entity property. So there's an ID, a entity type, and a entity property. The first two, ID and entity type, it's an integer and a string respectively. That's not a problem. That's something we do want to expose to via REST, JSON API, and GraphQL. But the entity one is just a PHP object that is just handy for those doing PHP programming, but it's not relevant at all for a REST, JSON, or GraphQL API. So we were missing the ability to indicate that a particular property is meant to be internal to PHP land. And that was blocking us from fixing several additional issues, such as given a file entity, we want to have on the file URI field, we want to have a URL property that gives you the HTTP URL to download a file, so that you don't get that public : / something, but that you get an HTTP URL that you can actually download. Another one is for text fields. If you have the text that is stored in Drupal, a body field, that just contains a bunch of text that is then filtered into actual HTML. You want to be able to get that actual HTML, not the stored data, because otherwise you would have to re-implement all filters on the client side in your app that is consuming JSON API, GraphQL, or REST. And so in order for us to be able to do that, we needed this piece of infrastructure to land. And it took a year of discussions and 6 months of building consensus with field API and entity API maintainers. But yesterday it was finally committed, which means that we can now finally work on fixing those remaining serialization gaps, normalization gaps, and so add a few of those missing computed properties and missing, basically add those missing computed properties. And that means that we can make it so that the workaround that JSON API ships with for file URLs, we can remove that. We can make it so that if, for example, JSON API extras, which is able to say, okay, this field or this property, I don't want to expose it to the world, it has its own implementation. Well, now, if it builds upon the infrastructure that Drupal 8.5 is adding, that will be respected automatically in core REST, in JSON API, and in GraphQL. So you can configure in one place which fields you want to be exposed, which properties you want to be exposed, because this also works for fields. So if you want to hide a particular field from the outputs, in JSON API extras you were able to do so, in GraphQL you were also able to do so, but each had their own implementation. Now you can just look at what type data is saying. Type data description is what's it called? Authoritative. It decides what should be respected by all ways of getting data out of Drupal. And so that allows us to have it all be consistent, and on top of that have open API documentation, Swagger documentation, automatically be in sync as well. So it's a stupid tiny bit of infrastructure, but it enables good consequences for the entire ecosystem. And that is why it's so important, and why there's so many issues now unblocked, and why the unblocked issues can help JSON API, GraphQL, and REST. Hopefully that was not too detailed, but I figured I needed to have some detail.
No, I think that I agree. This is important. Just want to highlight. You already said this, but want this to be clear. This change will also allow not only module authors or maintainers to be opinionated on what they expose, but also site maintainers to say, okay, for my site, I want to set this to expose. So it also it not only allows for correctness from the module maintainer point of view, but also for customization for the site itself. So I think that's a great tool. We needed it.
Yes.
Do you think it's the right level of like per site customization? Because
yeah, go ahead, explain.
Yeah, so it feels weird to like, because this property is now on the type data level, right? Which is a really fundamental API, and it feels weird to like basically expose type data in configuration.
Well, okay, I see what you're saying, but base field overrides and configurable fields are also configuration in the end. All that this would be doing is have a module, I don't know what the name would be, basically hide fields from APIs, something like that.
Yeah.
The only thing it would be storing is which properties and which fields it should mark as internal. And so upon installation, it would just modify the type data, and it would say set internal equals true on all of those, and it would just, like every rebuild that you do, you would still get the same end result because you have the same base fields, you have the same configured fields. This would happen after that, and we just say, okay, well, on this particular site, we consider this field or this property internal. That's all we're doing.
Yeah, the reason why I think that could be problematic is, for example, the default content module. Because the default content module probably requires like all beside the like computed fields. So they need all the fields to be exposed.
Okay, yeah, that's like the default content module can choose to ignore that. That's why JSON API and GraphQL still need to be updated to respect it. Only core REST, the serialization module, has been updated to respect it. But
that's the thing, right? Default content is using the serialization module. And that's it.
Yes, but they could choose to override that and for their needs, right? It is a particular use case, and they can choose to have their own format. And in their own format, the only thing that is different would be that they override the respecting of this internal or not, and that's it.
So for me, I mean, there's the use case of like hiding or renaming or something, because you don't want to expose it, and then there's the one which is you don't need it, right? You want to minimize your payload. So I think somehow making that somehow a different thing is kind of important, I think.
Sorry.
Because the API really is designed for, this is actually not meant to be there ever.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. So maybe we run into issues and we can't do the JSON API extras and GraphQL hiding of fields. Maybe that turns out to not be feasible. But in any case, if a particular field is marked by its field type implementation or by its entity implementation as being internal, that should be respected by everything. Precisely because, for example, an entity reference field, it doesn't make sense to expose the entity property on an entity reference field to the entire world. Like, that is nonsensical. There is no way to expose it in a good way. So I just saw the opportunity for JSON API extras, GraphQL, and so on to all respect the same thing. But maybe there are problems with it. That's possible.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for GraphQL, but for JSON API extras, it feels like we have so many Drupal APIs and we couldn't do this. We thought that, if you want to hide a field, and I know that this is not exactly only for a field, but for properties inside of fields, but allow me the slackness for the example.
Yeah.
If we want to hide a field, maybe we could use the access system to just deny view access, but that has other repercussions on other parts of the system, and that was not feasible. So having a dedicated tool to tackle this problem, to me, I don't know if the implementation is going to be, what we need. Hopefully we can fix it, but I think that just having it and the concept that it being there,
yes. So I should have been more clear. I should have said we must look into, as GraphQL and as JSON API extras, whether this makes sense for those use cases as well, because it is very, very similar. But maybe, like, it's certainly possible Daniel is right. Daniel has been right once or twice, I think. We should investigate it, because it would allow us to have it be consistent across everything without having to configure. Like, if a site has both JSON API and GraphQL, you would have to make sure that the settings configuration matches just the same way in order for you to get the same data. This would solve that, but maybe there is a problem with it. We need to investigate.
Well, the adding or hiding of fields is on our GraphQL roadmap right now.
Isn't or is?
It is.
Okay.
But just to get back to your example, we are actually using the computed entity field a lot.
Right. GraphQL is kind of special in that way, but you're using it internally, I think. You're not exposing it directly.
It's kind of internally. We are actually deriving it from the type data property.
Yep.
And then we're using it to resolve the actual entity and traverse down into its fields.
Yep, and that's exactly what I was getting at. It makes sense for PHP code, but you can't normalize it directly. That's what doesn't make sense. So yes.
And the other thing is that this mechanism of exposing or unexposing parts of the schema, or parts of the data structure, well, type data is one part of the data structure. So we plan to do some UI or some configuration options to narrow down what you want to expose on your for your API. But just narrowing down on type data won't give us all options we need, because there will be views that are exposed or custom fields or.
Yeah. But again, that I totally see that, and so maybe that sounds like you would need your own mechanism for sure. But maybe the materialization, the way that that configuration is materialized into a particular configuration that can be saved, maybe that can be different depending on which thing you're looking at. Maybe for fields and properties, you would be using this new internal property on type data data definitions, because then it would automatically be reflected in JSON API as well. But maybe that's something to be looked at later. Maybe that's something you just don't want to deal with initially. Totally fine. Just I wanted to make sure that people were aware of that is a way for things to converge, and for us to not each have competing implementations for similar things.
All right. I'm going. Oh, please finish that. But I want to just be mindful with everyone's time, and it seems that we're taking a long time. But please finish that, and then we are going to ask everyone else if they have anything else to share.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think, though, like, the internal thing has to be respected by all parties. I mean, there might be other stuff we need to add, but I'm assuming if you expose something that's set internal, that's a security risk.
So that is basically saying JSON API and GraphQL should respect it.
Though they might need something extra to remove certain fields under certain payloads or something like that. But
they should always respect internal. They may have their own layer on top of that in order for their own visibility stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. If that is the recommendation about the security stuff, I hope that is in the change record. If not, it would be nice to add it, because there's other web services that are not represented in this meeting, so it would be nice for them to also get that. So sorry, this was a great issue. I knew that was going to be a great issue. I selfishly went first, and now I realize that we should give Philip and everyone else a chance to give an update.
So this is me to start or everyone else?
Or
All at the same time.
Well, there is not a lot of update to GraphQL. So 2 weeks ago, around 2 weeks ago, there was the beta release, and not a lot happened since then. So our major goal right now is test coverage, documentation, and get stable out as soon as possible.
related to
Are you looking for help in particular areas or feedback in particular areas?
Yeah, feedback always, sure. Help, it works right now. We will need help when we discover more problems, I guess.
Okay, I would just wanted to give you a chance to say, well, we really need people to try this or that, but it sounds like
yeah, we need people to try everything.
Okay.
Awesome. Great, people go and try everything. I wanted to say that Tarek, who sadly I don't think he's in this call, has been moving forward the effort of adding this into Contenta. One of the things that he did was either creating the code to have automatic or out-of-the-box mutations for all entity types. And for the people that are not familiar, mutations are just writes in general, and deletions as well. He added deletions as well. I don't know if Reservoir also wants that. It's like a transparent copy. If Reservoir wants it, there's nothing special about Contenta in there. But I'm wondering, is that advisable at this moment, or Philip, would you rather see read-only GraphQL inside of the Drupal distributions, or like maybe not rather see but recommend, or that looks fine to you? I know that you looked at the code.
Well, our main problem with mutations was that automatically derived mutations required a lot of domain knowledge of Drupal and type data in the client. So you needed to know the whole type data structure, field properties to properly populate an entity and send it. This was our main problem. We had the implementation working, and in our projects we found out we don't use it because it was just too complicated. And we always kind of in the end replaced it with just a custom mutation plugin that did the same thing in like 3 lines of PHP code, calling entity API and hitting save. And it was, in our project, it was the better option, and we did not yet find a nice solution of a self-explaining and easy to work with mutation API for GraphQL.
Right. Yeah.
So the writes always happens on the server side and never from the client, or
no, it's just the mutation. Like you want to create the comment by with a GraphQL mutation, and what you want the client to know is that the comment has a body text and perhaps an email address or something like that. And with the implementation we had before of mutations, you had to know the exact field property names of a comment entity and how to attach it to the node. And it was just more complicated than necessary.
Okay.
And it didn't help us too much. And that's why we decided to deprecate it for now. And yeah.
What I'm hearing is that the developer experience wasn't great. Therefore, what you end up doing in your projects was leverage internal knowledge of the GraphQL module to create your own mutation plugins that had better UX for the client side.
Yes.
Is that okay? That that's reasonable to me. I would still rather see where this leads us, because sometimes you will not have the luxury to get a Philip in your life, and
well, it's the module is still there. We have all the code that we deprecated is in the GraphQL legacy module.
Mhm.
So there are mutations, and we can use them, and we plan to get them back.
Oh, I'm not suggesting to put them back in the module. What I'm saying is that I don't mind to have that added to a distribution as a playground for people to try it out and see where that goes. I don't know how that level of experimental needs to be communicated, so that's a whole different problem. But yeah, maybe that's a good playground for people to try it in content and reservoir or
Yeah, sure. We were just hoping we wanted to get it out of the main module just to focus down on the stuff that's stable there, because we saw that mutations would change at some point.
Yep, sounds like a good decision then. So it sounds like you feel super confident about GraphQL queries reading, but the mutations will change, is what you said.
The type data derived mutations,
right,
that were part of the module before the beta, we did not use them successfully enough to be sure that they will stay this way.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, and that is, I think that would be expected, because we know that from beta to stable there is a reasonable amount of time that you cannot get without, and I think that would have get caught. But I like the approach of being conservative in that sense. So cool. That is a great explanation. If anyone is curious to see how you enable that back, they can go to the GraphQL legacy module or go to the content API pull request, because I think that's where the code is coming from. Maybe I'm not sure about that, but it has have the same feel when you read that code that you get when you read the GraphQL module code. That's what I'm saying. Cool. We are a little bit over the hour, but still, if anyone else has anything. All right, that was a good meeting. Awesome job, Ted. You won the meeting today.
A lot of people helped with that issue. All right, have a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.